Well, hey, authors, welcome back to another of our Experts for Authors series. Today, we're talking with an aquatics expert. We've got Danielle Keil here with us today, and I'm super excited because you have quite a bit of experience in this field. So, what do we need to know about you?
Yeah, I actually have been in the aquatics area for over 20 years. I think 2000 was the first year that I really dove in, if you want to say. I've done everything from being on a swim team to coaching a swim team. I have been a lifeguard. I have trained lifeguards. I have been a pool supervisor for both outdoor pools and indoor pools. I've been an aquatics manager where I ran the entire department for a health club. The only thing I haven't done is teach aqua aerobics classes. Um, that's not my forte. That's not really an aquatic thing. That's like a fitness thing. So when people ask me if I do those kind of fun classes, I have to say no. But everything else I've pretty much done in the past 21-ish years.
I love it. And we're going to dive in and ask you some questions. We're going to talk about all of your jobs and your wealth of knowledge. But if you're joining us live, you do have the ability to ask Danielle your questions while we are live on air. Please feel free to drop those into the comment box. If you are on our replay on YouTube, we're sorry you missed the live stream, but you can still leave your questions down in the comments below. We'll do our best to get those answered for you. And we might just have to have Danielle back to get those questions answered as well. So feel free to drop your questions down below as we are jumping into today's conversation. And Danielle, I want to talk a little bit about job specifications. So I know you kind of go through a realm of different jobs with this. What do we need to know about those specifications and the qualifications people need to get into this part of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to be a lifeguard, let's say, and a lot of lifeguards we know are high schoolers, sometimes college students. There's a couple different companies, I'll say, that will do that. So American Red Cross is probably the biggest. That's the only one I've worked with. Ellis is another big one. They have their own set of specifications. And there's a couple other few ones, but those are the two that I really acknowledge as the bigger ones. Red Cross, I will say, we'll go with because that's where my knowledge is in. You have to be 15 years old. So you have to, there's an age requirement, and then you have to go through the certification process. So there's anything from having to swim a certain distance, and it doesn't have to be the prettiest strokes. It doesn't even have to be a real stroke. Whatever gets you, that length, you have to be able to dive down in a deep end and grab a, certain size brick, we call it. It's just a big rubber brick. And then you have to be able to go through the process of, learning all the saves and learning all that CPR and all that kind of stuff. What a lot of people don't know is lifeguards actually have a higher certification in training than just the average person when it comes to CPR and stuff like that. We are what's called a professional rescuer. So if you're on the middle of the street and somebody's pushing you away and say, I know CPR, you can kind of be like, you know what? My CPR is a little bit more advanced than you. Let me take this. But yeah, it's about a week long. Most people run about a week long course. There's usually online stuff you have to do. They do a lot of their stuff online now, but back in my day, it was paper and pencil. You have to take your tests. You have to take all that kind of stuff to prove your knowledge, and then you have to test out at the end of the lifeguard course, which is basically going through, I think, about 3 or 4 different scenarios that the instructor would give you, and your job obviously is just save the person in the correct ways. So once you pass all of that, you can go ahead and get your lifeguard certification. And then usually throughout the time that you are guarding, the place that you are working at will get scenarios and, fake things for you to do to test you while you're guarding to make sure that your skills are up to date. They'll do in-services, which will just, go over all of the things you've learned and make sure that everybody is still fresh, because, we don't want you to use it. When you're a lifeguard, we actually don't want you to save people. We want you to prevent the things from happening that will make you have to save people. If you're a lifeguard and you've never saved somebody, that's actually a good thing. We don't want you to use your skills, but we need you to practice your skills to make sure that you know what to do if you have to use them.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you are preventing it, you're actually doing your job. So
yeah,
I like that we've mentioned that. How often do you have to kind of re-up your certification with these kind of things? Is it like a yearly thing, every couple of years? What does that look like?
You know what? I think they've changed it recently, but they usually have to redo your CPR certification before you have to redo your lifeguarding certification. In CPR, I mean, it's changed probably at least 5 times since I've had my certification first. Just, when they compressions to breaths and all those things. It's science, and it's science-based, so that changes all the time. So CPR is one you have to redo more often. I think that was every 2 years. They might have actually changed it to every year now, but 2020, I don't think they were recertifying many people at that point, but yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. If you are joining us live and you've got questions, we would love to get those answered for you. Go ahead and drop them down into the comment. I see we've got people jumping in. Hello. We are talking all about aquatics and water life and lifeguarding and all these wonderful coaching, swimming things. If you've got questions, now is a fantastic time to drop those for us. We talked a little bit about some of those specifications and the qualifications. We know that there is that age limit, so you have to be a certain age to do this. Talk to me a little bit about the different types of facilities someone might work in as a lifeguard. So I know that there's like open, closed things. What does this look like?
Yeah, so when you take your lifeguard certification through the Red Cross, let's say, there's 2 different types you can do. You can do open water, which is just an added part at the end of your certification. For most people, it's just pools. So if you're at a health club, if you're at there's actually where I used to work, there were different quarries that you could go work at. Any sort of body of water that is going to be open to public that needs lifeguards at. I've worked at health clubs. That's where my background kind of came in. I've worked at summer camps. Yeah, I mean, it depends. I have never done open water. That actually terrifies me. The thought of lifeguarding on a beach where you can't see the bottom. So you can't tell if somebody is down there, and you can't see past a certain horizon. That terrifies me. I give all the credit to people who work at beaches and open water because that's scary, and that takes a whole different kind of certification and skill set to do, to learn how to run into the water, Baywatch style, and and do all that. It's hard. You have to be strong. And that's one thing I don't think a lot of people understand is how strong you actually have to be a lifeguard. I'm not saying that you have to be, some super fit person that lifts weight all the time, but you have to realize that if there's a 250-pound person at the bottom of the pool, you got to get them, and actually, funny story, there was a heavier set guy when I worked at my day camp, and we were running the lifeguard training before camp started. There was a heavier set guy, and we would actually have him kind of walk around the pool and be like, all right, guys, if you're not listening, because we're talking to teenagers, right? If you're not listening, if you can't pass this, we're throwing him at the bottom, and you got to go save him. And that kind of would be like, okay, no. So, but I mean, it can happen, where you have to save, and it might take, a couple people to do it. But yeah, I mean, even when you're dealing with, an adult or an older child, there's strength that has to come with it. And you have to actually have a little bit of power to do CPR too. And you gotta push on those ribs. When you see it in movies, it's, like a little, and they're bending their elbows and all of that. And you're like, no. You might have to break a rib to actually do CPR. You got to put some force into it.
Yeah. So. I definitely remember doing my CPR trainings over the course of the years. And you think that it's not quite so, it doesn't require quite as much strength, but it really does. And then they scare you by saying you might actually have to break some ribs. That's a terrifying thought. Terrifying.
Yeah, it's okay. If you hear a crack, it's okay. If you puncture their lung, that's okay because you're saving their life.
Yes, no, that's something they definitely have to prepare you for. I feel like that's something that TV does not cover. And we're going to get into what the entertainment industry does not cover in just a moment. But I have a question for you because we are kind of talking open water versus pool. And I want to know, is there a specific ratio of lifeguards that have to be in these locations? And does it differ from like an open water to a pool situation?
It differs everywhere, and it probably differs in every state.
Okay.
They're run by the health department. So every state might have a different thing. When I worked at my day camp, we had about, God, 50 different people who worked there. And when it was time for lifeguarding versus teaching the swim lessons, all the lifeguards, we had 4 pools. So all the lifeguards would surround the pool. So we had, 10, 12 people per pool. When I worked at a health club, we had, this big giant pool with slides, and we had to have lifeguards at the top of the slide, lifeguards at the bottom of the slide, and then, every certain amount of feet or part of the pool, depending on where the entertainment part was. So if we had a splash pad over here, we needed somebody there, we need somebody on the island, we need somebody over by the lazy river. So it depends on what kind of attractions you have. And if you just have a basic lap pool, you might just need one lifeguard at the end. It depends on where you can see. You want to be able to obviously see all the different areas. If you have a blind spot, you might need to put another person over there. You have to be able to see the bottom. So if you can't see the bottom of the pool from a certain distance, you might need to put another person over there. But it depends on the capacity of the pool. For open water, I think it's a whole different set. They might only have one lifeguard every 50 yards, but they also have binoculars and stuff like that too. So.
That's a good point. And I'm sure this probably differs from place to place to place, but on average, how long is a lifeguard's shift? Does that take a couple of hours? Is it more than a couple of hours? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the shifts can be different, depending on where you're working and depending on how long you're on stand. So where I used to work, we try to keep people on stand for 15 to 20 minutes, and then they would rotate. So you're not actually what we call down for maybe an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, hour, 20 minutes, if we're doing 20-minute rotations. The reason that we rotate them so often is obviously so they don't get tired. You'll go from a sitting position to a standing position. Maybe you're in water for 20 minutes and then you're out. And also to give your eyes kind of a rest, if you want to say, because you're spending this entire time. You should never be still. If you're a lifeguard, your head should be constantly moving. You're looking up and down year round. If you're sitting like this, you're not a lifeguard. Okay, you're just having a nice little break. So you want to give your eyes a rest of looking in the same spot for so long. So yeah, we used to do about 15 to 20-minute rotations. If the pool was super busy, we might even do a little bit less just to get these people moving around. But yeah, as long as your shift is, that just depends on the place you're working. But even when you're in one place, we have a 5-minute rule. So you want to go, if you're in a sitting position, if you're on stand, you're going to sit for 5 minutes while you're doing your scanning, and then you're going to stand up where you are for 5 minutes and do your scanning. If you're in a standing position, it's just so much of, making sure you're constantly pacing around a little bit, that kind of stuff. But you need to stay as alert as possible. So sitting or standing in one spot for, more than 15, 20 minutes it's going to tire you out. But
that makes a lot of sense. So on that note, I want to talk a little bit about what a typical day looks like. So when you arrive at work, what do you do? Do you have a sign-in process? Do you have to, go change your outfit? What does this look like?
Yeah, so if we're talking lifeguards, you're gonna arrive. We always told our lifeguards to arrive at least 15 minutes early. You want to have time to get into your, obviously your swimsuit, your guard suit. You want to make sure you have all your equipment. So you need your whistle. We always try to make them wear shorts or whatever they need, your hat, your sunscreen. You want to get all of that done well before your shift. So if we're doing the outdoor pool, let's say at my health club, we would be getting dressed, walking out there, making sure you have your name tag, anything else that you needed as part of your uniform. And then you're going to get out there, and the supervisor out there would tell you, this is what the rotation looks like for the day. So you're going to start here at this position. And the rotation is the same, around the pool. It just depends on where you're going to start. So you're going to start here, and then you're going to, swap out with this person. You want to make sure that you have your equipment ready for when you get out there. Everything needs to be set, because the second you're on stand, you're on duty. Something can happen from the very first second you're there. So you're going to get there, your supervisor will tell you where to go, you're going to swap out that person, and then the whole rotation will start, and you are on duty until you're done. Usually when you're down or you're in that 20-minute area where you're not actively watching the water, we have you're not just sitting around doing nothing. You're either cleaning, you're picking up towels, you're getting water, you're refilling the water tank. You're doing something other than just sitting there, unless you're on an actual, like work break or lunch or something like that. But there's always something to do around the pool. There's, the chemicals you need to go check, make sure everything is balanced. That a lot of time people don't realize can be a lifeguard's job, to do all those kind of tests and make sure that everything is looking right there. If you're a supervisor, you're not actively on stand most of the time, unless you need to take somebody's place, if they need to use the bathroom, if they need to go get water, something like that. But as a supervisor, it was our job to, walk around and make sure that everybody was alert. I would rather go get them water than to take them off stand, because you don't want to, they have their pattern of what they're looking at. They know how many people are out there. They know who's doing what crazy thing. Yeah. And then you rotate until you go home.
Awesome. I love it. So I know, before I move on to my next question, I know you do more than just lifeguarding. So typical day in swim coaching and the other things?
Yeah, so swim coach is a little bit easier, I'll say. You do need to have actually some of the same certifications. If you have a lifeguard certification, at least in Illinois, this was true. If you had a lifeguard certification, it took place of what was called the safety training for swim coaches, because usually, not always, but usually there's actually no lifeguard on the pool that you're coaching. Some places have different rules, but a lot of the times in a lap pool where people are doing lap swim, there's not always a lifeguard. So if one of your kids went under, which that happens too, you would need to know how to save them. So you would have to have that same certification, and then some extra ones for things like hypoxic blackouts and all those things that are, relevant to actual competitive swimming. Mostly it would be after school hours if we're talking school year. So you would, you show up beforehand. Ooh, sorry, phone call.
Okay.
Make sure I never get phone calls either. It's all spam. But you would make sure all your sets and everything that you're going to have your kids practice are ready for that day. You want to have it ready. You don't want to have the kids show up and be like, I don't know what we're going to do today. There should be a set that you make for the day. You should have a plan for the week, and you should have an overall plan for the season. Depending on the age level that you're coaching, you want to have a general plan. Your kids come in, you toss them in the water, you tell them what to do. You break up the fights of the kids who are being mean. And yeah, the thing is, when kids are in the water, they think you can't see them. It's the funny thing. And this is everywhere, for lifeguarding, for swim coaching, for, teaching swim lessons. They think when you're underwater that you can't see them anymore. So you really gotta, you always are paying attention. And so I will say one thing. We talked about being strong to be a lifeguard. It is also very exhausting to be a swim teacher. And nobody really understands that. Like, my husband still didn't understand that. And I taught lessons for, years and like decades. And, but if you think about it, you're in the water. So you're pacing in the water as a swim teacher. You're going back and forth with them. You're not just standing in one spot, unless you're teaching the little tiny ones. But you're also lifting the kids up. You're holding them in position. You're walking with them. You're moving them over here. The bad ones, you have to sit out on the side. Like, it's exhausting to teach. And they might only be 30 minutes each. But if you're doing a shift of, 4 hours and you have 8 lessons back to back, by the time you go home, you're going to be crashing, because it makes you tired. So, yeah. And you get a lot of steps in being a swim coach, walking up and down that, 25-yard or 50-meter pool, depending on where you are. I hit my step goal every day, just being a swim coach, going back and forth.
How many people can you coach at once? Is there a limit to that? Or do you put a personal limit on that? Do you do bigger groups, or do you prefer the smaller groups?
It depends on the ability level. I never say swim team has an age limit or an age level, because it's really by ability. I could have a 6-year-old who swims better than an 8-year-old. But yeah, for the younger ones, we'd like to keep it smaller ratios, just because they need a little bit more eyes on the water. because if they're younger and they're smaller and they might not make it as far, that kind of stuff. So we definitely want more eyes on the water with the younger ones, and those ones with the less ability. But as they get older and they get, better swimmers, I mean, we could have upwards of, 20 kids to one coach, and it would be totally fine because they know what they're doing and they're not going to goof around as much and they're less likely to drown, I'd say. But yeah, so it just depends on the age and the ability, I'd say, and what you're comfortable with and what your workplace is comfortable with.
Fantastic. Danielle is in our comments and she would like to know, when lifeguarding, is that the sole focus? Are they allowed to carry on conversations with people at the pool? Can they play games with the kids, or what does this look like?
Absolutely not. And that's actually really funny that she asked that, because when I'm training lifeguards and we're doing scenarios and we're, going through pretend things, one of the things I like to do as a supervisor is, whoever is supposed to be the primary lifeguard who's supposed to be watching the water, I like to be that obnoxious parent that'll walk up and like almost stand straight in front of you and just start blabbing. And if they don't, politely ask me to move out of the way so they can see the water, they failed. And now, granted, they're not failing the whole course. We're going to stop, we're going to reset, and we're going to talk about it. But no, they should absolutely not be talking to anybody. And of course, we're talking about teenagers most of the time, and their friends are coming to the pool, and that hot guy over there is walking up, like there's distractions for them. But no, they should not be carrying on a conversation at all. If somebody comes up to ask them a question, if it's a quick question, absolutely, they should not be turning to answer the question. They should always have their eyes on the water 100% of the time. We had a special code that with a whistle, that if the lifeguard needed to get the supervisor's attention to get this person, away from them or send them over to answer a question, that's fine. They should not be playing games with the kids, because then their sole focus is, throwing that one ball to that one kid when the kid over here could be slipping under the water. So no, their sole focus is on the water, always moving, always looking. They should not be doing anything else. They should not be listening to music. They should not be, reapplying their sunscreen while on stand. Obviously we want them to drink water so they can, take some sips of their water, but that's not going to break their concentration.
So in that case, what happens when they come up against someone who is a little bit more on the belligerent side? I know you mentioned that they've got a code with the whistle to get the supervisor over there, but what if it's maybe going to take a little bit longer than they need? What is the protocol for dealing with people who are actively getting in their way?
So usually when you can call the supervisor, that they get there pretty quickly. I mean, it's our job to hustle, literally. But if, as long as they're to the side or behind you and they're speaking, you can still keep your eyes on the water and just, in one ear and out the other with what they're asking you. But I mean, I literally would just stand there and just say, sir, I need to keep my eyes on the water. I need to be lifeguarding right now. Please take your question over to my supervisor. We will answer you as soon as we can. If they're literally in front of you, I would give my guards full permission to move around them and keep your eyes on the water. Whatever you have to do your job and make sure everybody is safe. That's my number one. I mean, if it came to the point where, you're not going to be rude to somebody, but if you have to be, assertive to get them out of your way, then be assertive. Like, I will always back my guards 100% if they're doing something to make sure that people are safe.
Fantastic. So on a related note, let's shift just a tiny bit. I want to talk about the equipment that is used with lifeguarding or swim coaching. What are those key things that we need to know? The words that we're going to call them to Google later. What are those big things that we need to know when it comes to this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so when talking about lifeguarding, there's pretty much only two things you really need, and one is a whistle, and the other one is a rescue tube. On your rescue tube, that's the big red thing that will hold under our arms or somewhere on us. Usually it's a big black strap that's going to go around your chest. It's going to go from one shoulder, kind of like a sash, under your other arm. That's called the leash. What you don't want is, if you're sitting or you're standing, you don't want the leash hanging down, just dangling while you're holding your rescue tube. if you think about it, if you're in a sitting position, usually most of those stands have poles that come out to the side. If you're resting your tube on those poles and your leash is dangling and somebody starts drowning and you're going to jump in, that leash is going to get stuck. Right. So we always ask that you gather your leash up and you're holding it. Sometimes you can wrap it around the tube a little bit if you're just kind of walking around with it. You never want to leave the leash dangling on your rescue tube. And then CPR obviously has all the other masks and all that stuff. For swimming in general, if you're teaching lessons, you're coaching, or you're just doing some laps, if you're on the team, whatever, you usually have a kickboard, and that is the thing that I don't even know what it's actually made out of, but you're going to hold in front of you while you're kicking. It's not a projectile, which a lot of people like to do. If you put it underwater, it shoots up in the air. Yes. But yeah, that's just something that's going to go under your arms to keep your upper body afloat so you can use your legs to kick yourself down the pool. There's a pull buoy, which is a little kind of, again, I don't know what these things are made out of. I want to say styrofoam, but I know it's not styrofoam. But it's a little buoy. It kind of is like shaped like an hourglass, and it goes in between your legs all the way up. It doesn't go between your ankles. It doesn't go between your knees. It goes all the way up, as far up as you can put it between your legs, and you're going to just keep your legs closed. Sometimes we have the kids cross their ankles if they're having trouble keeping the pull buoy in, and that's going to keep your back end afloat so you can use your arms to work your arms. Sometimes with the pull buoys, we use paddles, which is just sometimes a flat piece of plastic that has little like rubber things that go over some of your fingers to help you, work the arms and get some arm work in. Those are really the three main things: the pull buoy, the paddles, and the kickboard. Fins, sometimes some people call them flippers. We usually call them fins. They can be long fins, they can be short fins. They all work different ways. But those will work obviously to get some speed work in. It's not always just for kick work. It's a lot for speed work. Yeah, and then we have snorkels and all sorts of other crazy things too. But those if you were to say I'm joining the high school swim team and you need to bring an equipment bag, you probably will be getting paddles, pull buoy, kickboard, fins. Those would be the main ones, and then whatever else your coach requires.
As a very related note to that, let's assume that someone is writing a story where there is a teenager on a swim team. Where do they typically store this equipment? Do they carry it with them? I'm thinking it's not going to fit in a locker. So is it like a sports locker, or what does that look like?
So it's different, obviously, for whatever school you go to. You'll get it in a mesh bag, so water will drain out. Some schools will have a separate storage area that when you're done, you can go hang the bag on a hook, and then the next day you come back. Sometimes we do have lockers in the locker rooms that also fit. You just keep one of your gross towels on the bottom of the locker in case it's still dripping when you're done. Sometimes you have to carry them to and from every day. So you'll have if you're in high school, you're going to have your school backpack. You're going to have your swim bag, which is about twice the size of your school backpack, because it's going to have probably 2 towels, a handful of caps and a couple pairs of goggles and a ton of swimsuits and all the other stuff that's like a woman's purse that it just collects, and then you're going to have your equipment bag. So you got a lot of stuff that you might have to carry around if you're a swimmer.
Sounds like it. We've got another question coming in. She has seen pools with chairs that hang out over the pool like a hammock. Are those hard to get out of when there's an emergency? It seems like they shouldn't be, but to me, it looks like they would be hard. Have you had any experience with these?
I don't think I know. That hangs over the pool like a lifeguard sits in? That I'm not sure hangs over the pool. I mean, the only thing I can think of that would be, because we don't want anything over the pool because then you can't see underneath you. The only time I would say that is if there's a diving well, we'll have a guard stand that you might have to climb up to. So you could obviously get a better view of what's there. And that might hang over the pool like a foot or 2, and you would still be required to look underneath you while you do your scans. I don't know anything about a hammock that would hang over a pool, though. No.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I feel like that's something we're going to Google later to see what this is.
I might.
We're learning things. It's a great thing. If you're joining us live and you've got questions, now is the time to send in your remaining questions. We're wrapping up in the next few minutes, but we want to make sure we get everything answered that you need for your upcoming stories to give that authentic look to what you are writing today. So if you've got questions, now is the time. If you're on a replay, you can still drop your questions down below. We would love to get those answered for you. And I want to change gears just a little bit because I know this is the most exciting part of these interviews. And it's all about what the entertainment industry gets wrong about your jobs. And I know you have things to say, so go, girl.
Okay, so I'm going to preface with, if we're talking competitive swimming first, because this is where I have an example in, there are 4 main strokes that you swim in competitive swimming. There's freestyle. Some people call it front crawl. That's one where you're on your front and your arms are doing this and your legs are doing this. There's backstroke, which is the exact same thing, but flipped. You're on your back, you're doing that. There's breaststroke, which is what people use like the froggy kick and this kind of pull. And then there's butterfly, which is, you'll think Michael Phelps right away. That's one where both arms come out of the water and you keep your legs together in that mermaid kick. Okay. Freestyle and backstroke, you do what's called a flip turn, where you do a somersault at the end of the wall and you push off to go the opposite direction. Breaststroke and butterfly do an open turn, which is where you touch the wall with 2 hands and you turn and you push off. There's no flip. I will always remember, I want to say it was a tampon commercial, but I don't think they were supposed to really have good detail on what this was. But if you're going to use a swimmer who's doing butterfly, don't do a flip turn. Like, it's really like one simple Google or one simple, question to somebody who might have some reference of swimming would know that. You do see a lot, you do see a lot of swimming, I would say, in commercials more than you do in, movies and TV and stuff like that, because pools are relatively hard to film in. And once people get wet, your take is over, So you do see a lot in that. I do judge them by their stroke, depending, on what they're doing. But yeah, that one tampon commercial just was every time it came on, and this was years ago now, but I'm just like, they weren't doing a horrible butterfly stroke. It was pretty decent. And then they did a flip turn, and I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you'll see a lot of times when, they're supposed to be competitive swimmers in movie or TV and their stroke is just horrendous. And you're like, well, okay. I mean, you're doing the right stroke at least, but it doesn't look like you would go very far, very fast.
I imagine in movies and TV shows when they have to have an actor do something that they're not necessarily trained to do, it must be very interesting with the extras working around them to make sure that the proper person gets to the location on time.
Right. And you think, okay, do I have to swim slower to make this happen? Or yeah, I mean, swimming would probably be the easiest thing to put, a stunt double or somebody in there for, because you have a cap, you have your goggles, and you're wearing a swimsuit. So really, as long as some of their, facial features were somewhat similar, you could probably get away with it.
That's true. That's a very good point. Anything else that we need to be aware of when it comes to being in the water or around the water that the entertainment industry gets wrong, especially when it comes to writing books or creating those TV shows or movies?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously we talked about CPR, and when you see people do CPR the wrong way all the time, which you kind of, if you're using a real person, there's only so much you really can push down on them. So, but yeah, I mean, you just have to realize that this is actually a good point. If we're talking lifeguards, drowning is not a big giant production at all. I mean, most of the time you're not going to see somebody splashing. If they're calling out to you, they're not actually drowning. I mean, they're what we call an active victim, because they're still, they're still above the water, they're splashing, they're shouting, they're in danger, sure, but they're not drowning yet. Most of the time when you have a drowning victim, they're going to be bobbing right above the water, trying to catch that breath. They can't get up. They have no forward movement. they're not going to be shouting. They're not going to be yelling. They're not going to be splashing because all their body is mostly underwater. They're trying to push themselves up and they just can't get there. And they're going to be going under very, very quickly. You want to try to get to a victim in less than 10 seconds because things start going downhill. If they are already underwater, you need to get there fast and you need to get them out and you need to assess them. But if you're talking drowning in your books, most likely they're not splashing and they're not causing, this big giant scene. But that's also a really good tip just to know for life, is if it's quiet, you should be concerned.
For anything in life, I feel like that's very good life advice there.
Yeah.
Are there specific things that lifeguards look for when someone is drowning? Like, I know you said they're pretty much kind of just going above the water and they're not doing a lot of movement, but is there something that particularly would catch your eye when you are on guard and paying attention to these things?
Yeah. So what you want to do when you're in your position, wherever it is obviously you want to do a head count. So you know how many people are in front of you. Now that's going to obviously change all the time, but you want to get familiar with the people that are in front of you. You want to know the kid who's just playing games and likes to go under and hold his breath. And, you're going to sit there and you're going to count to 5 in your head. And if they don't pop up, you're going to start getting worried, You want to know the little girl who, keeps testing the waters and is going just too far out. And you want to keep an eye on her because she might just take that one extra step and she won't be able to stand anymore and it's game over for her. You want to just keep an eye out for those kind of things that's going to prevent you from having. So if that little girl kept going, I would probably be the lifeguard that says, hey, sweetie, let's make sure we stay over here where you can stand. That's preventative. You don't want to just wait until she does it. That's not good. But yeah, you're going to watch underwater for sure. You're going to watch the people who aren't coming back up from underwater. You're going to watch the people who, usually it's a smaller kid who can't touch the bottom somewhere. And if they're, like this, trying to keep their mouth above the water, they're going to be in trouble very soon. You want to watch the rowdy ones who might, be doing something as they jump into the pool that can harm them. Or, I always say teenage boys because teenage boys are ridiculous and invincible.
Yeah.
But they're going to be rowdy and hitting each other and jumping on each other, and they're going to cause issues where somebody might get hurt and therefore then slip under the water. So those are the kind of things that you're just going to watch, and you just need to know who is really in front of you, and you can only do that by making sure your eyes are solely focused on that water.
Fantastic. Any final things that we need to know, resources we should be aware of, things we should be looking at when we are writing anything aquatic related in our books?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to put a lifeguard in a book, it can be just super simple. You don't have to go into, massive detail about what they're watching or, their training or anything. Just make sure that you don't have them chatting with the person next to them or, zoning out or leaning back in their chair. Just make sure they're always very alert when you're talking about them lifeguarding. If you're putting a swimmer in a book, which I would love, I put swimmers in my books. My next book has her main focus is she's a swimmer. Don't be afraid of it. Just because you don't know it very much. It could just be as little as, just learning some terminology like freestyle, backstroke, flip turn, fins, like those kind of things. It's just can be as simple as that. I will say if you're trying to put a hot guy in your book, put a swimmer. I mean, just go Google, just go ahead. You not everybody has to be a quarterback. And I've used quarterbacks in mine too, that's fine. But go ahead and Google guy swimmers. Okay, especially if they're in their Speedos. Go ahead. I give you.
This is your gift to us.
Yeah. But yeah, so if we're talking Red Cross or lifeguarding, I would say American Red Cross, and then you can just click on their aquatic section and learn anything you want to learn from over there. If we're talking swimming, I would go to USA Swim, and they do all of the main swimming stuff, competitive swimming. You can just learn a bunch of random stuff by kind of clicking around there.
Fantastic. And before I let you go, tell us real quick about your books.
Okay, so these are my books back here. I'm a young adult, new adult kind of author. I have a romance series that's out, and I have, actually, this one is my swimmer. She has her goggles on the back. This one comes out next week. It's called Far From the Surface. It's a part of a young adult contemporary series. They're 16, 17 years old. They're going through life and issues and, you know, the hard-hitting stuff. But she's my swimmer and she's my baby, and I love it. But yeah, so I do the young adult, the new adult. So this orange book, Out of the Darkness, there are lifeguards in that book too. So I put it everywhere.
I love it. I love it. Where can everybody connect with you online?
I have a website at authordaniellekeil.com. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. I am not on Twitter, but I am on TikTok. And that's how I found you.
I know, that's where we connected for this. I'm so excited, by the way. Thank you so much, Danielle, for joining us today. I really appreciate all of your knowledge, and I cannot wait to have you back.
I'm excited. Thank you so much.
All right, friends, we are doing another Experts for Author series edition. We are going to be talking to Haley Walden, also an author who is a martial arts expert, next Thursday, February 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern, right here inside of our group. If you have not joined our experts group yet, come on over to experts.kmrobinsonbooks.com, where we will be continuing our series with martial arts. We've got a lawyer coming up. I hear we have another pilot and some really cool people who will be joining us in the next months as well. So if you've got a suggestion, if you're looking for something for your book, go ahead and let us know. Bring your friends over to the group, and of course, you can get to the replays on our YouTube page. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, have a great day and stay inspired.